We have to talk about mages, because mages, I feel, are getting so much attention, it's ridiculous, man. Okay, let's talk about Frostfire hero talents first of all. Frostfire has been updated to use Fire Mage's Living Bomb behaviors and now benefits from talents that affect Living Bomb. Excess Fire now applies Living Bomb at 75% effectiveness for Fire Mages. Now, they said, we're aware of an issue where Frost Mages' Living Bombs are also being cast at reduced effectiveness. This will be fixed in a future build. Sure. So, Living Bomb, Flame, that's what you are. You're a living bomb walking on the street.
That's the biggest compliment I've ever received, man. And the police don't seem to agree. But it's interesting that the Frost Mage will have better damage from Living Bomb, but that's probably because of scaling. I think Living Bomb will probably still scale better for Fire Mage because it's a Fire Mage ability.
It's a fucking living bomb. It's not like a living icicle.
Yeah, for sure. But what's good is that they're addressing the damage profile of these two specs individually, where we've had problems before with hero talents where they've addressed like a generic ability that affected the most specs, but it would affect the specs differently. So one spec would have to be the loser just because it had to be balanced for the other one. So it's good that they're taking the effects individually and keeping them balanced so that Frost doesn't lose out just because Fire Mage was doing too much damage with Living Bomb, I think.
But you want to talk about Spellslinger?
Oh, everybody wants to talk about Spellslinger.
This is just for Frost and Arcane, okay? So we're gonna shut up the Fire Mages for now, all right? Let's see. Splinter's maximum stack count reduced to 8 until Splinter Storm is learned. Yeah, you better learn that. Control Instincts no longer has damage variance. Control Instincts damage is now kept at 5 targets and no longer splashes. Boo-hoo!
I like the splash.
Volatile Magic now correctly damages the primary target having its end splinters removed. Volatile Magic now deals 1 instance of damage that scales based on the number of stacks removed. Now there's a note here, the changes to Controlled Instincts and Volatile Magic are being made to help reduce the number of damage events and increase performance in high target scenarios. So they're basically helping you to not lag.
Yeah, and not have like, I mean, I legit heard people like that, like they were lagging out, and I can only imagine how this would be in raids with like 2 Arcane Mages out there.
Okay, we also have Frost Splinter damage increased by 100%.
Yeah, they had to do it.
Okay, you'll develop more because you play a lot of it. And Frost Splinter damage increased by 100%. Frost Splinter Storm damage increased by 100%. Jesus effing, Splintering Orb's Arcane Orb now only grants 2 splinters per target hit. This was 4. Please.
Yes, so Frost Mage was getting a lot less damage from Spellslinger as much as compared to Arcane. I mean, we've tested that last week. You would have seen it if you caught our stream. And having everything being double now just shows how off and how behind Frost was for Spellslinger. And obviously the Arcane Orb only granting 2 splinters instead of 4 is a nerf to Arcane Mage. I think that's probably fine. What the cool part about Spellslinger for Arcane is all of the procs that you would get, not necessarily the damage, but the damage is also great. But it's nice that they are actually keeping the damage in check and they're addressing, because this, oddly enough, Spellslinger is probably one of the most complicated hero talents to balance properly, considering it has so many things that it works with on there. I've heard that there were so many bugs with this. I don't know if all of them were fixed, but it's looking like this is the fattest chunk of class changes so far.
What about Sunfury? Because we have to talk about
they need to buff
well.
this. Is this buffed? Because I cannot see.
Okay, let's see. Burden of Power now increases the damage of Arcane Blast by 30%. It was 15%.
Good.
What do you know? Phoenix non-exceptional spell damage increased by 20%. Phoenix Greater Pyroblast damage increased by 30%. Phoenix Arcane Surge damage increased by 100%. Should we all just quit WoW and let the mages play?
Oh my god, Sunfury was probably something that drew people's eyes out the most because, you know, it's Kel'Thas, so I summoned a Phoenix.
Of course, yes.
But after they played Spellslinger, they're like, fuck Sunfury. But now, Sunfury was actually underperforming compared to Spellslinger, I think for both Fire and for Arcane. Once again, we're seeing, well, the Arcane version of Sunfury was buffed with Arcane Surge doing double the damage, and obviously the Fire Mage as well for 30% more damage on Greater Pyroblast, which is great because we know that there were the talent that essentially let your Phoenix cast more exceptional spells was bugged for a long time, so they fixed that as well. So now, when you get your Phoenix out, you should be able to feel it, and that would be great. I don't know how this will affect the visuals, because it still happens, you know, like right next to you, there's so much going on with Fire, you don't even see your bird just casting better spells than you are, basically.
I love the Phoenix popping up all over the place, and I'm happy to see once again that they're finally doing this. They're finally looking at non-performing hero talents and bringing them up. And once again, Sunfury was the bay until everybody understood that Spellslinger was where it's at. Well, Now, not the case. I cannot wait for you to test that out on the stream.
You and me both.
But listen, it doesn't stop here. We also have some proper spec changes here, and we're gonna kick it off with Arcane Mage. So, Mr. Arcane Pleasure Boy, Arcane damage reduced, Arcane Barrage damage reduced by 65%.
Yeah, but read the next one.
Arcane barrage damage increase per arcane charge increased to 90% was 30%.
I think this is mostly an adjustment. This has been talked in the Mage community for a while. I think there was a problem with how the damage was scaling for Arcane Barrage, so they're essentially addressing that, which is what you're seeing right here.
Okay, Arcane Blast damage increased by 10%. Concentration now procs 3 times per minute, was 2. You gotta love that. Arcane Echo now has a 0.2 second cooldown between procs. Arcane Echo damage increased by 25%. Well, this is not really nerfed.
Well, they nerfed Arcane 3 weeks ago. I think after it was like, oh my god, Arcane meta, Arcane OP, we're gonna see Arcane MDA.
A little bit crazy.
Everybody shut their pants for like 2 days, and then it was nerfed, and I'm like, fuck, Mage is dead. Because that's, the bipolar reaction of the community, which is funny. So now they're kind of buffing. The buffs are good, particularly the Arcane Blast, because it was actually a DPS loss to cast Arcane Blast sometimes in single target, which was weird. So that's great to see that, plus the Arcane Barrage having less upfront damage but scaling more with Arcane Charges makes it so that you don't cast naked Arcane Barrages just because the dynamic between Arcane Barrage and Arcane Blast and Echo was probably skewed too much in favor of Barrage, which is great. And we're also seeing more adjustments to bring Arcane back to maybe a little bit behind Frost Decay and not so far behind
Frost Decay?
I was, the killer in beta that everybody kept talking about for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Mokti was talking as well about Frost.
Everybody losing their mind. Well, not anymore, Not anymore.
Well, let's check out Fire for a change, because I feel the nerfs are coming. The nerfs, I'm pretty sure Fire is gonna get the nerf hammer. Pyroblast damage increased by 5%. Phoenix Flame damage increased by 10%. Fireball damage increased by 20%. Flame Strike damage increased by 10%. Quick Flame Strike damage bonus increased to 25%, that used to be 20%. Flame Patch damage increased by 30%. Living Bomb damage increased by 100%. I give up. Wow. Was Fire
I don't see the nerfs, man. What are the nerfs at?
I know, I was just trolling. Was Fire in need of this?
I don't know if these many buffs, but Fire was underperforming a little bit compared to the, but this is weird.
Why are we comparing it with?
Exactly, because we have such a huge dynamic in people's performance on beta, because we don't know exactly where it's supposed to be, because on one hand, you have Frost Decay and Unholy, who are just like destroying everything, and on the other hand, you have BM Hunters, who are just crying in the corner, and we don't know where the balance is. Are we all supposed to do as much damage as the Death Knights, or are we all supposed to do like something in the middle, right? So judging by the class changes and looking at the Fire as well, it's probably closer to the DKs and not as much nerfs as you think, considering how the content scales and what kind of damage you need to actually clear, I guess, Mythic Plus, because that's what we've been testing so far, to clear them in time. It's looking like the damage was probably needed, and we're probably going to keep seeing classes being buffed to get closer to the Death Knights level, and the nerfs that you might expect from, I say Death Knights, but pretty much everybody at that level are probably going to be very tiny to keep the balance somewhere around the higher end of the spectrum, I would imagine.
Well, I guess that makes sense. We have a couple of more changes to Fire. All talents that affect Lit Fuse's proc rate have been reduced by 50%. This is Lit Fuse, Explosive Ingenuity, and Explosivo.
That's such a cool talent to say.
Yeah, Explosivo.
Just to mention really quick while we've skipped, the developer knows they want fewer living bombs, but bigger living bombs. They want you to feel the meat. Reduce the frequency of damage events like they did for Arcane, but just make them bigger.
And I love that. I love that concept. Okay, Explosivo's living bomb damage increase during combustion reduced to 40%, was 50%. Talents that grant guaranteed living bomb gain a lot of power from these changes, so we're adjusting them to compensate. It's pretty logical. Deep Impact's cooldown reduction is reduced to 10 seconds. It was 15 seconds. Living bomb is now target capped at 8 targets and no longer splashes. Well, I guess they're reducing. They're helping with your lag, Flame. That's what they're doing. Living bomb visual effects now have reduced fidelity in raid groups. Told you, man. They don't want that lag, baby.
Those ad fights.
Yeah.
But I'm
similar
confused
to what happened to Arcane as well. So they're kind of limiting the target.
I mean, you have to admit that Mage is kind of like a disco spec. Like things are happening on your screen all the time. What I'm curious about is I do want to understand that if the living bomb is now target capped, but it no longer splashes, does it mean that it doesn't splash past 8 targets, or doesn't splash at all? Meaning that every single target is just damaged by its own living bomb? That's what I need to know, because it could read either
question.
way.
It's a good question.
So we'll probably need to test that out to see exactly how it is, or probably the Mage community has an answer already, but we'll see.
Okay, we also have some Frost situation
Oh,
here.
yes, please.
Yes,
Give me Frost buff, baby, let's go.
No, this is nerfs all over the board. I can already see it. So, Iceland's damage increased by 10%. Glacial Spike damage increased by 10%. Flurry damage increased by 12%. Blizzard damage increased by 50%. Frozen Orb damage increased by 10%. Comet Storm damage increased by 10%. Splintering Ray of Frost damage increased by 30%. This was 25%. Splitting Ice Lance damage to nearby enemies increased to 90%. This was 80%. Cone of Cold damage is increased by 100%. So Frost Mage was already looking pretty fine. I think with this, it's gonna be...
On the beta, was behind the other two, as far as I know. The buffs are pretty good. The Con of Cold is like whatever. Nobody does any damage with Con of Cold. That's pointless. You just use it to activate things.
Well, if you use it, if it's gonna have more damage, then it's
I foresee the Splitting Ice buff to be particularly juicy with 10% more cleave damage, especially in fights. I haven't seen all of the raid fights. I believe we probably have a council fight where Splitting Ice would probably be really good. Same thing with Ray of Frost. Comet Storm was a big chunk in your AoE, so that's really great. You're probably gonna be enjoying the AoE. What's interesting is the Blizzard damage increased by 50%. Blizzard is not, it's okay. It's kind of like
it did okay damage.
Yeah, but it was never like, oh my god, I'm casting Blizzard, I feel great. So I would love to go back to a time where Blizzard was like, oh my god, look at all that damage, because you would think for a company like Blizzard would have the spell Blizzard being the best damage source for your mage, but we'll see how it turns out.
All right. So this is for the mages. Again, I think mages got like the biggest notes
As
once
always.
again.
Surprising anybody? I don't think so.
Not really.